Welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at slicing in Python. And in the same way that you can slice and dice fruit and veg, you can slice lists, strings, tuples, and any sort of sequence in Python. So there are lots of different things that you can slice. Obviously strings, lists, and tuples, but you can also create your own data types that you can slice if you want them to be able to do that. Before we look at slicing, you have to remember indexing starts at 0, and then there's no index that's the same length as the thing you're slicing, and of course it also goes backwards from -1 to the length. So slicing, if you have a sequence and you just put a colon, then you get the entire sequence back. And don't forget that you index it using the square brackets. If you just put a low number in, you get everything else in the sequence above the low number. If you put a high number in, you get everything from 0 all the way up to the high number, -1. You've also got sequence low to high, and this doesn't go from low to high, it goes from low to high -1. You can also add a stride, in which case it will go up in steps of stride. You can go from a low to a stride, or to a high using a stride. And you can have all three, where you go low, high, stride. And this is the most important thing to remember, other than the fact that defaults are 1 for the stride, 0 for the beginning, and -1 for the end. So you can also go backwards if you have a negative stride. If you go backwards though, you go from high to low. You can start at high, end at low. And it's worth noting this time that you end at low +1 rather than low. And if you don't want to do that, instead of using sequence start stop step, you can use sequence, and you can use the slice function with start, stop, and step. Although it's a lot easier to use this, so there's not really any need to use that function there. So this time, instead of writing some code or just showing you something in the IDE, I'm going to show you a Jupyter notebook. And Jupyter is really great for running code and demonstrating it. But before you need to install some things. So if you remember from the first tutorial, we installed pip, and that's because you need pip to install Jupyter among other modules. So you can just type in pip install, and then Jupyter lab, and then run that. And you can see I've already got everything installed, but what it will do is it will go through and install Jupyter labs. So you can see we've got Jupyter lab, notebook, tornado, Jupyter lab, and then some other interesting ones are Jupyter client, Jupyter core, JSON5 requests, 6, which comes up a lot, setup tools to install it, URL lib, pickle share. And the reason is this is actually now going to launch a web server when we run it. So if we type in Jupyter notebook, and then the file name, and see now it's launched a localhost, and so this is the Jupyter notebook. If you're interested in running this, then you can go to the GitHub page, which is in the description, and clone the repository or download the files, and then you can run this yourself. So the way it works is you have all these individual cells, and you run each cell in turn generally, and this altogether makes up a kernel, and each kernel can be run independently, but inside the kernel everything is shared. So this string we can access down here, so we might want to say at the very end we want to read the string, and so we'll see that the string is unchanged. You can also go backwards and forwards with kernels if you want, and it will share all the variables across the whole page. So at the start we've defined a string, which is string list tuple sequence, and then we've defined a list, and our list is our string, but we split it. And so this split function just takes a string and turns it into a list, and it replaces each of these, so in this case it's a space, with a comma. So each of the spaces becomes commas in our list, and so these will become individual items. If this was, for example, an E, then everything up to here would be the first element, then the space and the S would be the next one, and then the Q and the U, then the N and the C. And at the very end there wouldn't be anything. So if we just run that, and then run the second one, you can now see this is our list. And so if we take the first item of the list and the 0 index, we're expecting to get L, so we can run this. And we can also play with this list. So if we take the negative first item to the last one, and then go backwards with every other letter, you can see we get E-N-U-E, E-N-U-E. We could also, for example, reverse indexes 3 to 2, because of course it goes to the n plus 1 if we're going down. And so it's worth noting that if we then run it forwards, these two are not the same, because this goes 1 and then 2 and never gets to 3, whereas this goes 3 and then 2 and then never gets to 1. So if you wanted to get this forwards, you would run this command. Then we could take the second item, so the tuple, and print off every other letter. We get TPE. And of course we could start at a certain place, so if we take the first item, get every other letter, we should get it, and then we can just see at the end that our string is exactly the same. See, string list tuple sequence. Hopefully you've enjoyed this lesson. You've learnt at Jupyter notebooks, which are quite complicated and quite high level. You can't really do them without knowing quite a bit of code. And we've had a look at slicing. So see you again, same time next week. Till then, bye.